Welcome, everyone. You are joining the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area League Day. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area 2026 League Day. Madeline Cronenberg and I, Marianne Shovelin, are very excited to welcome our great speakers and all of you to League Day. Our League of Women Voters Bay Area mission is to monitor, educate, and advocate League positions in a regional context, observing regional planning and governance, and reviewing how decision-making impacts communities, addresses systemic inequities, and promotes transparency, financial accountability, and inclusive participation. Our Bay Area League covers a broad area. And our program issues of emphasis include support for implementation of sustainable integrated regional governing policies and practices that recognize the interdependence of environmental, social, health, and economic impacts and provide for the long-term protection of our natural and social resources. We advocate how agencies address the interrelated regional issues of housing, transportation, conservation of natural and agricultural landscapes, climate change, sea level rise, social health, and equity in an integrated and holistic fashion. Our agenda today covers broad areas of governance, housing, environment, and health, as well as more localized climate challenges.
With that background, we now want to have our first speakers share their perspectives on the impact of regional planning and legislation on the Bay Area. With our LWV California Co-Presidents, Laurel, Plimmer, and Kandea, Mosley, Gandhi. Laurel serves as a member of the Piedmont City Council, where she sets citywide policy to benefit her community and acts as liaison to the city's planning commission. She is a U.S. Army veteran, attorney, and data scientist. She is well-versed in policy analysis and has over 15 years' experience as a practicing patent attorney specializing in software technology. And Kandea, also currently serving as co-president of the League of Women Voters of California, joined the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, Emeryville in 2016. She has a strong background in nonprofit and social enterprise management and in workforce development, solar and education sectors. With a career built in nonprofit and program management, she drives innovation as a collaborative leader and co-founder of Stride Labs. Take it away, Laurel and Kandea.
Thank you. Let me just pull up our presentation. So thank you to the Bay Area League for inviting me and Kandea to kick off your 2026 Bay Area League Day. We'll be talking today not only about our advocacy at the state level, fighting for policies that are important to all of our communities, including regionally here in the Bay Area, things like voting rights, affordable housing, climate action, But we also wanted to highlight the work that we do to educate voters and the ways that we support local leagues to increase your impact in your local communities. It's all of these efforts, not just our advocacy work in Sacramento, that come together to advance what matters across California.
At their 2025 retreat, the LWV US Board of Directors agreed to adopt 5 identity markers for their board. The move to these identity markers reflects an understanding of the current political climate and the need for the league to shift to new practices and ways of responding in order to maximize our effectiveness. In a time of what we're witnessing, flagrant disregard and assault on national and international law, we're promoting a new, bolder way to ground our identity as league members who are putting it on the line to defend our democracy. LWVC has followed the lead of national and changed it a bit to fit our own needs, to reframe how we are showing up in the current political environment. As many of you know, the League is very measured in its work, taking years sometimes to conduct studies and come to new positions. Today, things are moving rapidly and unpredictably, and it's important for our leagues at all levels to be able to respond to pressing needs expeditiously and effectively.
I'm going to quickly go through these 5 identity markers that the LWVC has adopted to inform our work in defending our democracy against authoritarian policies coming from the Trump administration. The first identity marker is bold. This includes naming names. We're holding our politicians and our government officials accountable. We're not afraid to call out individuals. Loud. We are visible and unapologetic. We're not shying away from press inquiries and being clear about our priorities. As a quick example, our executive director, Jenny Farrell, even gave an interview recently to Fox News. Influential. LWVC has always shined in this particular area. We're really well respected, and our positions on bills and ballot measures carry a lot of weight. Nimble. Able to make quick decisions and take actions quickly. Our last board meeting, as an example, we took an emergency vote on joining the opposition to an upcoming voter ID measure, and we were then able to get in right at the very beginning of that campaign. And finally, grassroots. The League, as you know, with its state and local leagues, is by nature grassroots, and it's important for us to be able to quickly mobilize local league volunteers and members when we need to.
At LWVC, we have 3 main buckets for our work: action and advocacy, voter education, and supporting local leagues and league members. We'll give an overview and discuss some highlights as we just move through our presentation today. Action and legislative advocacy. So, what that means is lobbying for and against bills, co-sponsoring pro-democracy bills, co-chairing ballot measure committees, and offering recommendations on ballot measures. This also includes leading and participating in trusted democracy coalitions, including No Kings.
And in addition to our action and advocacy work, our main voter education efforts at the state level are the Vote 411 online ballot lookup tool that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, our Easy Voter Guide, which is a printed plain language voter guide that you can see in the picture here for new and busy voters, and the tried and true pros and cons that we have to provide unbiased evaluations of ballot measures. The State League also provides support for members and local leagues in a number of ways. And I think it's important to highlight this because success at the State League is really inextricably tied to the success of every local league across the state. Together, we are really much more effective. And the LWVC offers administrative support to local leagues with website hosting, social media support, fund management, and a statewide shared calendar. We also host 16 different interest groups, and we have a few co-presidents initiatives to support local leagues that we're going to talk about a little later in the presentation.
The LWVC board will soon be reviewing our legislative priorities for 2026, which will likely be hyper-focused on democracy-related bills this cycle, given the attacks on the rule of law and our fundamental freedoms. As of right now, we are mobilizing as part of an initial coalition of voting rights organizations to oppose the dangerous voter ID initiative that proponents are trying to qualify for the November 2026 ballot. In the beginning of March, our coalition showed up in force at a series of press events where the initiative's backers were submitting their signatures. We used the moment to make clear to voters and the media just how risky this proposal truly is. Our executive director, as Laurel mentioned earlier, has been really front and center, speaking with numerous state and national press outlets. Our message is simple: California's elections are already secure. And our current safeguards include, at registration, voters certify eligibility under penalty of perjury. Officials verify voters' identities. In person, voters state name, address, and sign the roster. Vote by mail, signature verification confirms identity. Criminal penalties include, illegal voting is a felony, and non-citizens face deportation risk. Fun fact, you're more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to impersonate another voter in our country. This initiative, the voter ID measure, would erect new barriers that would prevent Californians, particularly low-income communities, folks of color, seniors, folks who move around a lot like students, those with disabilities, individuals who have recently undergone a name change, and many other groups from exercising their fundamental right to vote. Our advocacy here could not be more important for democracy in California because the initiative right now is polling at about 54%. So 54% of Californians currently support voter ID at the polls. So if this passes, it will absolutely keep people from voting and allow fringe interests to seize more powers. And problems that the initiative creates, some of which include privacy, identity theft risk from putting ID numbers on mailed ballot envelopes, because you would have to get a new voter ID number. More rejected ballots from data entry errors is what experts expect. More rejected ballots, time off work, travel, document fees to obtain ID, and false citizenship flags from flawed database matching errors, slowed voter count from more flagged ballots. So with coalition partners, to just highlight another recent win, California scored a key victory against the Trump administration in January over access to the names and personal information of the state's 23 million voters in USA versus Weber, when we persuaded a federal judge to dismiss a Justice Department lawsuit filed last year demanding our sensitive, unredacted data. The ruling followed an intervention by the LWVC that argued that the request constituted illegal federal overreach and a violation of voter privacy. By dismissing the case, the court affirmed that states maintain the authority to protect sensitive election data and that the federal government does not have unfettered access to private citizen information. It doesn't have that right. About 24 states are defending themselves from similar lawsuits filed by the Trump administration, which has sought to build a national voter roll with the information and the release of information such as driver's license numbers and partial Social Security numbers would be unconstitutional and another disastrous example of federal overreach, which would have a chilling effect on elections. Trump's DOJ appealed this case to the Ninth Circuit in February, where it's currently pending. Another exciting thing that we wanted to mention today is the Campaign for California Fair Elections Act. This is both a recent win and new work. So LWVC successfully lobbied for the passage of SB 42 that allowed for this measure to show up on California's voters' ballots in November. California Clean Money Action Fund, Common Cause, and the League of Women Voters of California just launched the campaign for the California Fair Elections Act that will be on the November ballot. If passed, excitingly, the act would remove a ban on public financing for elections. And so this would put power back in the hands of voters and not, with wealthy special interests. And so what does that look like? What does it mean if it passes? If it passes, local communities will be allowed to implement public financing of political campaigns. This would amplify small dollar donors and strengthen accountability while requiring strict safeguards, spending limits, and protections for taxpayer funds. In a nutshell, large donors and corporate interests that hold outsized influence in elections, this would help cut them down to size. The measure would also open the door for more working class folks of color, women, to run and win and strengthen the foundation of our democracy. The California Fair Elections Act would really give voters a chance to move toward elections where candidates can start listening more to voters and not spend as much time having to chase money. Housing was also front and center in the last cycle, and the League helped advance critical solutions. We welcomed the passage of SB 79 to expand transit-oriented housing, giving families access to both homes and sustainable transportation, while safeguarding affordability and environmental protections. We also backed key CEQA reforms through AB 609 and SB 607, elements of which were ultimately incorporated into budget trailer bills. These efforts help cut red tape that has too often been misused to block affordable housing and infill development. At the same time, we are closely following a plan for cleanup bills to address environmental concerns. Together, these wins mark important progress towards addressing California's housing crisis. Other items we wanted to highlight this afternoon, is our work to strengthen California's commitment to racial justice by advocating for AB 1071, which removes barriers to enforcing the Racial Justice Act, which we co-sponsored. We fought for dignity for incarcerated firefighters by supporting AB 247, which ensures they are paid a decent wage. We also backed equity for youth with AB 1376, capping juvenile probation terms at 1 year unless a judge deems that something else needs to take place in those particular cases. AB 1388, another effort of ours to work to expand access to police records, which we backed, and help to end non-disclosure agreements that conceal officer misconduct. And then another item legislation we wanted to highlight was the successful effort to stop AB 284, which would have weakened the Racial and Identity Profiling Act. And then in terms of ongoing action, with respect to mass mobilizations, we have been encouraging and supporting leagues across the state to organize for the largest days of protests across the country as a part of broader Unite and Rise efforts, with another No Kings coming up, as many of us know, on March 28th. Be sure to, one thing that Laurel and I want to mention, and we will send a reminder, is to be sure to take photos and document your reflections and participation to share with other leagues. So Laurel and I will be providing guidance and reminding people about safety tips because we really want to capture league members participating in these actions and the seriousness of these demonstrations against authoritarianism in the country.
And in addition to all of our LWVC's action and advocacy work, we also focus on voter education. And this is one of the main jobs of our staff member, Sharon Stone, who's our Director of Voter Engagement and Membership. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with Vote 411. It's the League's ballot lookup tool, populated prior to every election with information directly from candidates and ballot measures. But what some of you may not know is that it takes literally a small army of volunteers behind the scenes to reach out to the hundreds of local candidates and make sure that their information is updated on the Vote 411 site. And for those of you who do work with volunteers, and it's probably most of you who are on this call, you know that it takes time to manage them. And that's one of the many jobs that Sharon does each election cycle. And I wanted to just put a little plug in here for any leagues who might be hesitant about volunteering to help update Vote 411, because this tool is really most useful when all communities participate. Because when any voter enters their information to pull up their ballot, they'll get everything they need to cast an informed vote. And this elevates the effectiveness of Vote 411 across the state and really across the whole country because the same platform is used nationally. Another voter education activity that we do at the state level is printing easy voter guides. It's one of the League's most trusted tools for empowering democracy. And I love this photo here of Sharon testing the language of the easy voter guides in the classroom. So adult literacy learners, whether it's GED program students or English as a second language classes, they come together and review each Easy Voter Guide draft to make sure that the language is actually easy for them to understand. And it's also reviewed by the Legislative Analyst's Office to make sure it's not only just easy to understand, it's also completely accurate. And I also wanted to just mention that over the past several elections, we've been using the information from the Easy Voter Guides to create pros and cons for state propositions. This means that we can get the pros and cons to local leagues earlier, which is especially important now. Voting starts earlier in many counties, and voters, I know this cycle especially, are really anxious to return ballots by mail as early as they can. So it's important for us to be as early as we can so that we can provide information to the voters. One of the most magical things about the League is its grassroots nature. And that means that the success of each local league is so important to our efforts in defending our democracy against authoritarianism at the state level. We wanted to highlight a few things that we do at the state league to support local leagues in California. And it's especially important because I know a lot of local leagues are really stretched thin, like we all are these days. And based on conversations I've had with people in office hours that are from local leagues, many people are actually unaware of at least some of these programs. So I wanted to be sure to highlight them. On the tech and admin side of things, these first three programs are for a fee, so they're not free services that we provide, but they are definitely helpful services. The first is Milo, which probably everybody knows about. It's My League Online. It's website hosting for leagues, and it includes free tech support. We also have impact funds, which the LWVC will manage your local league's 501c3 funds if your league is a 501c4. And One Voice Social is our social media program where the State League will post for you, for your local league, in your Facebook and Instagram accounts multiple times a week to keep them active. And I've heard really positive feedback about that program from local leagues that use it. And then finally, this I'm surprised that people don't know about, but on our State League website, we have a free shared calendar. So you can post your local league events on this shared calendar, especially if they're virtual events. It helps cross-pollinate across leagues and promote the work that you're doing with your local league. And I'll post the links to these 4 things that I just mentioned in the chat. And if you click on the lwvc.org/events link, you'll see a pop-up message. And if you click on the gold donate button, it will take you to our education fund donation page. All of the work that we have talked about here that we do at the state level, whether it's advocacy, voter education, or supporting local leagues, it all takes funding, and we're extremely grateful for any donations of any amount. So let me really quickly post those links in chat. And then I also wanted to highlight our interest groups. So our interest groups, we have 16 different interest groups that anyone can join. They include members from across the state who are interested in specific topics like immigration, housing, money and politics, you name it. The groups provide a way for league members in California to support each other. To support each other in exploring advocacy and educational work around their specific topic of interest. And I wanted to remind everyone here that local action is really powerful. So we often like to think about federal and state policies because they tend to get the most media coverage, especially federal policies. But making sure that our local city and county officials are implementing policies that are in line with our league positions is really, really important. The interest groups also share information that members can use to advocate for state league priorities in their local communities. So all of those things that support our regional efforts here in the Bay Area, you can find support in an interest group at the state level. And finally, we wanted to share a little bit, and before I do that really quick, I just wanted to post the link so that you can see what our interest groups are. We wanted to share a little bit about our co-presidents initiatives that Kandea and I have been working on. The first is office hours. I've been holding office hours for almost 2 years now, and it's been a really great way to support local leagues. But it's also a really good way for us to get an idea of what's important to local leagues, like what's important to you in your communities. What are you struggling with? What are you having success with? One thing that we heard almost weekly during office hours was that local leagues really wanted to increase their presence with young people in their communities. And in response to this, we created LWVC Youth Circle, which is a group of they're like 25 years and younger, young leaders across the state who are either already involved and active in their local leagues, youth programs, or they're new to the league and really want to learn about activating young people in their schools or in their broader communities. It's a group that is by young people for young people. So it's not a bunch of older ladies telling these kids what to do, though there is plenty of guidance there and resources when they need it. And I also wanted to let you know that we have a panel coming up on April 15th, and I'll post a link in the chat for that too. It is discussing the youth circle and a few other youth programs across the state. And I hope if you're available and interested in attending that you will please do that. Again, that's April 15th. The Youth Circle is a really new program, but we're super excited about what we've done so far and about the potential of engaging a younger demographic with our voter education and advocacy information. It really is democracy at its best, engaging voters.
Another initiative that we are just starting is a statewide weekly action alert and toolkit. We're calling it One Thing This Thursday. The first iteration will come out this coming Thursday. We have heard that local leagues and people in general, as Laurel referenced earlier, just feel overwhelmed with the amount of work that needs to be done, writing to or calling our senators, joining calls, helping immigrant neighbors with food or transportation to school, holding events, protesting, attending webinars, you name it. It can be hard to know where to focus, and this can lead to overwhelm and sometimes complete inaction. Our goal with this initiative is to simplify things for everyone so that, you have one thing to focus on during the week. There will still be the list of additional actions if folks have time and energy. But for everyone else, doing this one thing in the aggregate across the state will have a big impact.
And speaking of overwhelm, in the league, we wear many hats, and they're all important. The league at all levels is made up of activists, advocates, educators, and organizers. But remember, you don't actually have to do all the things. Do what you can do, take care of yourself so you can keep on doing what you can. And together, we really can change our communities. By changing our communities, we can change our country and even the world. We will continue to do our part at the State League, and I hope that you please don't hesitate to reach out to either me or Kandea for support.
If you're interested in getting more involved in the State League, there are a number of ways. Number one, committees are a great way to get involved at the state level, and we're definitely looking for additional members to join our state committees. The league is also in need of volunteers when it comes to the Vote 411 team. LWVC has a small but mighty staff, and we, punch above our weight to get results, but this work takes funding and donations, as Laurel mentioned, to further the work. If you are a member, so be sure to donate. There's going to be different campaigns this spring to bring in needed funding to LWVC. Also, if you're a member, you will already be subscribed to our mailing list, but if you aren't, now is an excellent time to join. Our statewide membership numbers, help with funding sources. And for every member who joins at the state or local level, a portion of your membership dues supports all of the work that we described.
And this is our cheerful LWV of California staff that are so appreciative of everything that you are all doing across the state, including here in the Bay Area, to fight back against authoritarian policies and actions. So thank you so much, and let's keep doing the work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to, there's a couple questions that came in the Q&A box. If you can, I don't know if you can see that, but one of the questions is, what support does LWVC give to interest groups? It's a big debate in Oakland. Some Oakland leaders think the local has no responsibility.
I think it depends on the interest group. At a minimum, we provide the listserv for the interest group to communicate online. Most, though not all, of the interest groups meet regularly, and we host those Zoom calls. If there's something that a particular interest group wants beyond what they're already getting, please reach out. Because we definitely want to support the work that the interest groups are doing. I hope that mostly answers the question. And just like communications in general, making sure that people are aware of the interest groups so that if they have interest, they can join them.
Yeah. That's a challenge, I think, at all levels, both the local as well as the state.
Yep, definitely.
Another question is, one concern about the CEQA cleanup bills are critical. Connie Cunningham has lobbied Assembly Member Ahrens about putting in guardrails for advanced manufacturing so that low-income people will be at significant risk of will not be at significant risk of having polluting manufacturing build near them. Are we following this issue?
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say that Diz might be a better person to respond to that specific question. I know that obviously climate actions are one of the main concerns for any climate actions is making sure that you're thinking about marginalized communities and the impacts of climate that are disproportionate from one community to another.
Kathleen, are you familiar with this bill? She is our CEQA person and on the natural resources team.
It's one of the many bills that I've been looking at for CEQA. We're still reviewing it, trying to see what's needed, and then we're going to do an analysis of it, pass it on to you, the state committee, to make sure it is a bill either we support, oppose, or maybe there is something we can suggest to the legislator that needs to be added to make sure that that low-income people are not at significant risk. It's what we call the unintended consequences of some of these cleanup bills. And so, yes, we are following this issue.
Thank you for that. And I would just like to highlight that this is a great example of how the league works across the different levels of league. And I love that. So thank you for your work on that.
Another question we have, what types of social media does your social media service support?
Right now it's just Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. And another question is, will LWVC give its interest group's website and archival support?
That is a good question and something we can think about. We do have a new executive director, so things are in flux a little bit, but I love the idea, especially about archival support. Like, it's really important in a volunteer organization, especially, that we have a way of capturing the work that all of our volunteers are doing so that when one volunteer steps back, and everybody does at some point, that the next volunteer who's coming in has access to all of the work that's been done before them. So I love that question, and we'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, I think it's probably a challenge, at all levels, really.
Yep.
And can we make the chat copyable so that folks can copy those links? Okay.
Actually, Marianne, if there's the three dots to the right of the comments and chat, if you click on that, you can copy.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions that we have for our keynote speakers? Okay. Yeah, the three dots, someone has a problem seeing the three dots. They're very small, and they're up in the upper right-hand corner of the Q&A box. Okay.
And we can send the links to you if that might be helpful.
Great. And then we can make them available on our League Day page.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have. Okay. Now we have a panel coming up. that will be talking about league policy influence on housing and homelessness, climate action, city planning, creating healthy communities. And I turn it over to Kathleen Shaw, who will introduce the panel.
Greetings all. I think this panel is a great next step to what you just heard from our co-presidents.
Marianne, you need to stop sharing. There you go. Thanks. Sorry.
It is a great, my great honor and pleasure to be able to introduce the panelists that are going to go the next step of what you were just hearing. We're going to look at a panel with those league members with real expertise and backgrounds to be able to talk about climate action, housing and homelessness, and healthy communities, local planning. So let me introduce, I'm going to give you them real quick introduction, but I'm doing that because you really need to know what kind of level of understanding and expertise they're bringing to this issue and the kind of actions that you need to know about so that you in the local, we in the local level can make a difference because we understand what's out there and what we can do to ensure our league quality of life issues. First, Diz Swift, who is the LWVC Natural Resources Area Director. Diz has a PhD in geology and worked in the energy sector for most of her career. After her early retirement, she began studying climate change and advocating for action. She's lectured widely on climate action, climate science, action and policy, and including 5 years as a guest lecturer at NYU Stern Business School. She is currently, as I mentioned, director of our natural resources for LWVC, where she advocates with this full committee on climate and related legislation. Note that she founded the National League of Women Voters Climate Interest Group with 1,600 members spearheading grassroots climate across 50 states. Second, we have Teri Neustaedter, chair of the Housing and Homeless Interest Group. Notice we have the interest groups featured here and what they're doing and what you can be involved in. Teri is the, she heard a USC seminar on how the League of Women Voters California helped implement the state's new districting plan. And this inspired her in 2017 to join and become an active leader at the local, county, and state levels working on housing and homelessness issues. Besides she served on the task force that chairs the Housing and Homelessness Interest Group, as well as the legislative analysis team for the League of Women Voters of California. She's a director at large of the League of Women Voters of LA County, and she's president of League of Women Voters of the Beach Cities. Note that she had previously managed a breakfast ministry in West Los Angeles that served unhoused and working poor neighbors for more than 5 years, which gave her real insight in what is vulnerable communities and what is needed. And then we have Laurel Prevetti. She has a title, she said retired city manager, but she is so much more than that. Well, Laurel Prevetti has been a local government professional for almost 40 years. She worked 28 years at the City of San Jose Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. She spent 10 years with the town of Los Gatos, in which she served 9 years as a town manager. She also taught for about 14 years in the master's program of urban and regional planning with the San Jose State University. And when she retired, she decided she's going to volunteer with local and regional nonprofits, and she continues to coach, mentor, and train government professionals. I'm emphasizing all this because we always talk about local action and what to do, and she is really going to give us a real insight. By the way, she is currently chair of the Greenbelt Alliance Board, and she's a new board member of the League of Women Voters of San Jose, Santa Clara. So that is my verbose introduction, but I wanted to give you the insight into what they have to say is going to be exciting and interesting and useful for all of us. I'll now turn it over to you, Diz.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Climate change, where are we? Well, we know that the federal action is stalled, and that can give one pause and be discouraging, but state, regional, and local action is actually very vibrant. So we can still do a lot on climate change, and especially in the league when we have levels of local, regional, and state groups. We can make a difference, and the most powerful, of course, is our vote, to vote climate. So we need to educate constituencies so they understand the value, of their vote, but also that their views on climate are represented in their vote. So in the local and Bay Area level, education, action, and advocacy are all important. And as Laurel and Kandea said, do it all. Education. First thing about educating is make sure that you are informed. Know what you're talking about in the areas that are those that you're going to work on for policy. The information on all the areas on the left are under the League of Women Voters California Climate Change. So you can just search for that, LWVC Climate Change. And within that is a link to the LWV US Climate Interest Group. And in that, we have all of the areas that you see on the left. One of the most important is climate action plans. We'll talk about that a little bit, and there's exhaustive information on what to do and how to do it in the climate action plan section. Building electrification, food waste, renewable energy, transportation, which you'll see is very important. And then overall links to oceans, water, of which the California water team is one of the biggest. Forests and wildfires, which of course is very important to California. Climate and health and climate justice. So be informed, you have information. If you don't find what you need, you can reach out to the interest group and we will help. Of the two areas that are most important for California, there's transportation and buildings, which account for more than half of all the greenhouse gases we emit. Transportation is about 38%. If you account for fuel production, in other words, the refineries, it's 50%. And buildings, 25 to 37%. That's a wide range because it's difficult to evaluate emissions from buildings and other factors as well. Land use and municipal plans, which we can work with at the local and regional level, affect both significantly. Housing needs to be near jobs and transit, so we don't have the transportation taking people to and from. And related to that, we need to reduce sprawl. Electrification, electrify everything, so long as the electricity comes from a renewable source, not from a fuel producing or fuel using power plant. In California, that's pretty easy because we're working toward moving away from fossil fuels for electrification. Climate action plans, as I said, are arguably the most effective way you can get involved and be involved. The actions in them and all of the counties and most of the cities in the Bay Area have climate action plans. Most are to move away from fossil fuels, electrify buildings and vehicles, and also reduce vehicle use. And the processes are where we really can shine as the league. Make sure that there are goals that are set in the plans, that the goals are measured, and then hold the folks accountable, whoever's responsible for the action plan. Make sure the actions are specific and that there's a budget for them. and integrate the actions with public priorities. So maybe you have greenbelt priority, maybe you have sea level rise priority. Integrate the actions in the plan with that. And of course, transparency. One of the specific local actions you can take, which is more specific and can be a part of a climate action plan, is food waste. There's 25% of the food that we produce in the US ends up in a landfill or a combustion facility. That's a big number. And when I learned this number, I thought, holy cow, such a large number. 17% of methane gas emissions in the US come from those landfills. So food waste is an important area that adds to carbon emissions, and it's an area that you handle locally. So what can your league do? You can educate members and communities, participate in a waste reduction or food recovery program. And we have the US Food Waste Toolkit and Guide that we have produced at the national level that has wonderful ideas on what to do. So that toolkit is available. So some specific actions, as I mentioned, food waste. Refrigerants is a huge contributor, thousands to 10,000 times more potent than CO2. Those are what we call HFCs, or hydrofluorocarbons, that are used in not just refrigerants, but also in heat pumps. And so looking at what's happening with that in your community is very important. Sea level rise, flag vulnerable elements, and there will be much more on sea level rise later in this league day. All the above and all the specific actions are affected by policy, so monitor and advocate. You need to know what the proposals are and be on top of them. And Laurel Prevetti will talk more about how you do that. We can make a difference. We can, local and Bay Area, we can work on climate action plans. As I said, monitor and hold accountable. Very important to hold accountable. Local actions of a variety of specific local actions, and monitor and advocate, especially on buildings and transportation. So next we'll move to Teri.
Thanks, Diz and Kathleen. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about housing and homelessness. And you probably relate to housing more as what your neighborhood is like. And we all have, big hearts when it comes to our neighbors and how things are developed around where we live. But there are some really big picture points that we consider at policy level, whether it's with your city, in your county, or at state. We have so many people. We're the largest, most populous state in our union. California has, and many other states are now in realizing that they do not have enough housing for all of the people, because we have reduced the number of people in the homes that we do have. Affordability, the homes are too expensive based on what you're making as income. It's challenging to build. Every city, every county has its own rules and regulations. And now the state's coming in and trying to put new restrictions on things. And then you've got the cost of everything, whether it's labor or materials, and especially land. Unsheltered homelessness, I think we had about 185,000 homeless individuals last year. And even though we had kind of made a little progress on that, that is going to continue probably to get bigger just because of some of the financial constraints that we have. We got 9 counties in your area and 101 cities. So that's a lot of interspersed regulations and policies and planning groups. And then you've got the federal level on top of that. Housing and Urban Development, as well as California's Housing and Community Development Group. So it's a very gray area and complicated, just like natural resources. One thing to note is that the government has heard about its residents wanting things to really be accountable. We need a straight line way to be accountable for the money that's being spent, whether it's on the unhoused or whether it's in the funding that goes to building multi-unit developments. So last year, Newsom introduced kind of a new regulation. They are restructuring what was housing and community development, and they switched it into two groups. One is the Business Consumer Services Agency that has a lot of disparate businesses in it. And then they created the California Housing and Homelessness Agency. So everything will kind of flow up from the cities and counties into this agency at the state level. Much of it is the same, but there is a new department in there that's the Housing Development and Finance Committee. And so I think you'll see that hopefully we'll be able to streamline more of our funding and really be able to show where we are with development. And I should note that that probably will take a while. We're only probably 9 months into that restructuring, so there are hiccups. So housing in California, you may have seen 3.5 million homes at one point, but now we're saying that California needs 2.5 million homes. And more than half of this, over 1 million homes, need to be in that low income and below arena. And then we've got all of these unhoused people, the 185,000, which is bigger than a lot of cities. So I wanted to show you kind of this data dashboard that is inside of HCD. And so it shows the pipeline where we are from what's been submitted to what's entitled to the permitted to completed. And then it will break it out by the whether it's a low income unit, whether it's above moderate, moderate income unit, to see where we are making progress. So we need so much more in kind of the yellowish grades in there. At least we're getting some homes built, but that is very challenging to do with funding. These are all based on planning parameters that are established by HCD, and it goes through the regional housing needs allocation, and that is 8-year cycles. Next. This is a simpler grid to look at. You can see in the green, we're doing great with that above moderate income because those are really done usually by developers who they're interested in making money. And so they're able to get funding from banks and many places to be able to build this freely and do it kind of just on their own with their own group. But there's a huge deficit for moderate and below because it's hard to get funding for, look at that very low income, how much we're kind of still in the deficit there. It's just very hard to get the funding for those because it takes multiple layers of funding. And by the time you're in year 3 of getting the funding, someone else at the bottom may drop out. This was very common during COVID of, how do you keep that funding while you develop these units that are more about kind of just making, I don't even know whether a lot of them may make a small profit on them, but they are not at all like the typical development groups that you see. So what do the builders consider when they are putting some kind of plan together, no matter what level? You've got land, labor, and materials costs, which are all soaring for many, many reasons. And then there's these soft costs. And we talked a little bit earlier about CEQA, but there's permitting, there's impact and other fees that also add to how much things cost. They've got to maneuver around land use regulations, and it's hard to get around or get your hands on those soft costs because especially for the low income housing, it's very squishy, because things are always changing in how they're going to get their development, actually shovels in the ground and get things built. the availability of financing with the interest rates they are, what they're doing right now, and tax credits are limited for the affordable units. It's just a lot of challenge. And we don't really think about this very often, but there's that total time from the time we think about a project could go in this area to actually putting that shovel in the ground. That is just, if money is just sitting there, we just have challenges of, we need to be able to move that timeline up considerably. So it only takes a year or two, which still seems long, to get shovels in the ground and get something built so that it can actually house people. So it seems like California, I'm sure you're thinking, since probably 2016, we've had over 100 bills passed aimed at streamlining development and in building more affordable housing. We've got it in density and changing zones around, and that was for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, as well as the bill that got passed this past year that is about being able to add density within a half mile of mass transit. There are streamlining approvals that could be anything from builder's remedy to being able to build housing in an area that might have been zoned for more commercial, light commercial, or having changes to CEQA to be able to get things in that shovel in the ground sooner. And then there's all kinds of design restrictions for the ADUs. Being able to reduce parking spots allows, I think the latest number I saw was that a parking spot is basically costs a builder $73,000 to have. Do we want to have more parking spots? Do we want to have more housing for people? And when it comes to elevators, there's some building codes around having a single stairway, and I won't get into it, but there's just all kinds of little ways that add to the timeline and cut back on maybe how big a building can be, those kinds of things. We had been building around 100,000 units annually. Before that, and I say before, maybe 2010, we were way down. We were like building 80,000 units a year, and we need to be building more like 180,000 a year. And so we are way off from what really needs to be developed, that timeline. And then we have those natural disasters. I'm in LA County, so last year with all the fires down there, that created just a whole other level of things that need to be considered more strenuously when we go about rebuilding those locations. I wanted to just give you an example of like when our legislative team looks at things, this is kind of the whole universe of just housing bills, from affordable housing, production, homelessness. You've got very specific targets for seniors or youth. What we saw last year and the last couple of years really was tenant protection, tenant and landlord protection becoming a bigger issue because of the evictions, and how can we transition them instead of to the streets to either get them funding, maybe so they can stay in for a couple months and things can resolve. We're just trying to keep people from falling into homelessness because prevention works much better. And disasters, now we've got all kinds of insurance things, and, is this ground really, can it be built on right now with everything that's been burned into it? So we sift through a lot of bills and really try to come around to the ones that are going to matter the most, make the biggest difference. I wanted to bring the specific instance of our housing position in on this, because if you're going to advocate, even though we think of our neighborhoods and we may not be thinking about low and extremely low income and may not want those close to us, or what are we going to do with the unhoused, that we've just seen a lot of angst when you can say housing, and you're going to have new housing. There's going to be a new multi-unit group that's going to be, 2 blocks from my house. Everyone will show up to city council because they don't want anything built there. So if you're trying to figure out how can we advocate, what it can be on is, and I think it's important to note that for California, especially low and extremely low income can mean you're making $100,000 in California in certain areas. And so it's how do we welcome community and how do we build around to support everyone, not just what we want to have in terms of our housing value going up. And that's hard to do sometimes. And I don't know, some of you may have heard about, there's a group called Our Neighborhood Voices, and it is trying to get on the ballot. I don't think they'll make it this year. It may be in 28 that they'll make it on the ballot, but you're probably aware of this struggle between state and local, who has control, because in the past, it's really been our local governments that have had control over what gets built in our neighborhood. And the state is realizing that there are some issues for us statewide that we need to build more housing, and that means they need more control than they have right now. So in our state housing position, the state development plan is supposed to be front and center. And just like Diz said, educating members and the public. Do you know about your planning commission, both at a city or county level? When does the planning commission meet? Do you know what your housing element is? And trying to educate everyone around those so that when you maybe have observer corps, when something comes up in a city council meeting, you're actually able to go in and ask good questions to see what's being discussed. It's important to know that we're all in this together. It is not a clean process by any means. You've got land use that Laurel's going to talk about here in a minute. We've got meeting basic human needs, making sure those unhoused individuals, we have a path for them either to not fall into homelessness or have a path back into it. Transportation, we've got to be smarter about that and all the emissions and other natural resources. Water, for instance, we can be much more conservative with those if we're building up, maybe 5 stories, 6 stories versus spreading it out on a big lot, a big group of land. So this constant tug of war that we've got going on, we've got these extreme housing costs. Everything's going up. People have less money. We've got this severe shortage of affordable units and insufficient shelter for those at the low end. And we have more and more people in that low end, especially in California. For climate change, we've got to factor in being close to jobs and mass transit, the water electrification, and keeping that in the mix when we're talking about this. I think the league has been very good in the past about working in a silo, about here's just housing or homelessness. And we really are trying to figure out how to work across each other and support what each of the different interest groups and issues, what we can do and keep our positions intact. And that means, especially if we were trying to speed up the building process, that means that it's going to be a give and take. It's going to be compromise to work with the cities and the state to get the quote unquote best result, which is getting more people housed and spending less of their income on housing. Because right now we are very burdened with our fees for housing. Usually they want to keep that at 30%, and the majority of Californians are above 50% on that. And with that, I will turn it over to Laurel.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. I'm going to be focusing primarily on how local leagues can be more effective in this current legislative and climate change environment that we're facing. We all have new development coming our way in our communities, and there are times when a local league may want to get involved. At the same time, we are finding that our planning commissions, city councils, boards of supervisors, our decision makers basically have less discretion now. So we have to be very nimble and we have to be very creative as to how we engage to be effective. Next slide. So why is our local control more limited? First of all, some of the streamlining that has occurred at the state level is very good. It's putting housing in the right places. It's streamlining for things that actually make us a healthier and more resilient, climate resilient place here in California. This also, though, means that there's tighter timeframes for our local review, limited changes for proposed developments. And that means that if there is a project or something that a local league wants to influence, we have to be very quick on our feet in order to make a difference. And I'll give specific tips as to how we can do that. The second facet that has affected our limits to local control is that with the California Environmental Quality Act, as we try and streamline and make it easier for the right housing in the right places, it means that there are more fast track options. And primarily, we're seeing this, at least in 2025, in the form of exemptions. So there are more ways that projects can essentially be exempt from long environmental reviews and EIRs and other things where the public has in the past been very involved in commenting on the potential environmental impacts of our developments. And third, we're in a very litigious society, as you know, and local governments are being faced with lawsuits if they don't comply with the state laws according to their perspectives, the perspectives of the developers, the perspectives of the neighbors, or even the state attorney general. So the stakes are really high. And in our current budgetary crisis that many of our cities are facing, we just don't have the resources to fight litigation. Next step. Okay, so what can cities do? I'm going to talk a little bit about what cities can do so that way we have a framework for a local league to be able to act effectively. One thing that a lot of cities have done in California is they've adopted what's known as objective standards. And what that means is that they identify and quantify the measures that are important to them and they legislate them into their ordinances and policies. This way, when new development is proposed, those projects have to be evaluated against those objective standards. Secondly, many cities have other guidelines and policies that address local conditions. If we're in a hillside area, if we had wildfire considerations, if we have sea level rise. And so being able to adapt to those local conditions by having updated plans and guidelines can also help shape the future development in those areas. Many of us are creating riparian plans, habitat plans for specific areas, or other policies and local ordinances to really address those specific situations that are unique to your community. And as Teri said, getting to know our housing element is a really great tool. And we can be effective in making sure that the housing elements sites that identify where a city is focusing housing, that they avoid climate hazards. They avoid places that are going to cause difficulty and rather focus growth on the places that make more sense. So we can get involved in a lot of different levels. Next slide, please. So the leagues can certainly meet this challenge. Please get familiar with your local Bay Area and California league positions. They're great, they're common sense, and they really provide a great framework for your study. Some local league positions might need to be updated, and that's totally fine. The legal landscape is changing quickly, and the league is well positioned to make those changes. In addition, there are opportunities for all of our local leagues to participate in Bay Area and state league position updates. For example, the league at the Bay Area level is updating the regional governance and regional planning positions to acknowledge health equity and other considerations that we didn't think about years ago. And the league, given its propensity and its reputation for strong study, we don't take these positions lightly. So they're very thoughtful, very deliberate, and they can lead to excellent action. Next slide, please. Okay, so how can we make a difference in the actual decision-making process at your local league and at the city level, at the county level? And the best place to start is to understand the development process in your community. What is the zoning process? When is a permit needed? Is it a planning permit that goes to planning commission, or does it go to council? Or is it now something that only needs a building permit and there really isn't the opportunity for public engagement? So know what kind of project you're interested in and then what the process is for approval. Get involved as soon as a project is filed with your local planning department. That is the best way to know what is actually pending in your community. And the earliest you get involved, the earlier you can talk with the developers, the earlier you can talk with the staff and understand it, and then determine how you can best make a difference. Review and comment on the proposal as soon as you can. This is really important because the city will be doing an analysis of the project and it has to finish its analysis within 30 days. So you should be evaluating that what we call the 30-day letter, and make sure that the planning staff, found all those local policies and, they work so hard, they're going to do their very best. But each of you as league members may have different perspectives of like, I think this is a riparian habitat, for example, and we really need to make sure it's following that habitat policy. Make sure that if a CEQA exemption is being proposed, that there is the backup documentation to justify that. And you may find that actually the pressure to do an exemption can be challenged, and there might be another way to get your voice heard. Some other tips are understand what the state laws are that a developer might be using. There's so many now that a developer can choose. They can choose Builder's Remedy, Housing Accountability Act, or any combination, along with density bonus and some of the things that have been around for years. So being familiar with what laws they're using helps you be more effective. Stay engaged as the project evolves. They always change. Again, meet with planning staff, commissioners, and council members as appropriate. You will find that building that relationship early and often will serve you well. Attend and speak at hearings and understand how cities plan. LWVC has a great toolkit for the regional housing needs assessment, and understanding that can make you more effective. Next slide. So let's talk about a quick example of a local league in action. This is from San Jose, Santa Clara. We had to move very quickly to submit a letter to the San Jose City Council and to planning staff regarding an EIR and a proposed Heritage Oaks Cemetery that's located in a pristine valley that we've been trying to protect for years and years. The league took a very strong position opposing the project, primarily because it was so out of scale with the original zoning that was proposed for the site. We intentionally addressed our letter to the city council, even though they aren't the first step in the decision-making process. The first step is with the planning director, but we wanted the council to be on notice as soon as possible that we had concerns. We also had concerns with the environmental document, and we will definitely be staying engaged. So having that collaboration with our partners, we were able to coordinate our message and get our letter in quickly. Next slide. So leagues can definitely make a difference. As I said, our leagues do wonderful studies and carefully analyze issues. We communicate so clearly with our elected officials. This is a huge asset for us. And the collaboration with other partners is so important. So that way we can coordinate and make sure that we're really maximizing our impact together. Next slide. And that's it. Okay, I will turn it back to Kathleen, who will lead us with questions. Thank you so much.
Let me unmute myself. There are a couple of questions that have come up. Connie Cunningham posed this question. do our climate action plans include nature? Tree canopy, water are critical. Bird safe and dark skies emphasize how building and light policies affect not only birds, but people. Cities have much control over much of this. What is your assessment, Diz?
The climate action plans vary by city, county, and region. Some of them include dark skies, some of them don't. This is one of the areas where local leagues can really have a say. If dark skies is, or any of the others that you mentioned are important, then that's something you can advocate for. So you can't generalize about climate action plans. And water is almost always included, but otherwise they vary.
Okay. William Smith had something interesting that goes back to what you, Teri, and Laurel were talking about. Can the league do more to support private financing of housing that lower income households can afford? What do you think?
Do you want to go first, Laurel?
It's not my expertise, but
Okay.
as I understand it, the banks do have some form of community reinvestment obligation under state law. So that could be a leverage point. You know, I think we've been focusing primarily on how public funds, state money, for example, can be more available for low income. And I'll turn it to you, Teri, for other insights.
I was just thinking our area in the South Bay, in LA County, we just come together to do it's public funding, but it's like our own housing finance group that really is probably going to focus mostly on the affordable and the lower end. And it's taken us a long time to get these 16 cities together to be able to join in on that, but that's going to maximize the amount each city can put in for it. But to get private financing, it's not really private financing, but it's looking at other ways to get at land, whether it's what do they call it? A trust, land trust. Being able to do that, it kind of takes part of the expense away if you're leasing that land instead of having to actually come up with cash to create it. That would be my answer at this point. Happy to hear your ideas too, Bill.
Okay. And more to be discussed, more to talk about, you know, what we can do. I don't know if Laurel or Kandea are able to answer, because the next question kind of really goes to what we were talking about earlier. And the question is, this is a person who says, I'm not a member of LWV. I've just joined this webinar because I'm concerned about voting integrity of the midterms. And I know that's something we talked about earlier. So do you want to, Kandea or Laurel, talk about that? The other thing we can do is Megan Natala is the one. We can send you, Megan, we'll send you a copy of this particular whole webinar. And at the very beginning of the webinar, that particular about the voting integrity is addressed, and about what we are doing and the kinds of efforts we're spearheading to make sure our elections, the integrity of our elections and the access of our elections. How's that for a quick summary of it? So yes, this is something that we're very much in. I think the other is, there was a question about, are we going to support there's a possible low income bond going to be on the financing of low income housing on the ballot. What do you think, Teri, Laurel? Do you think this is a good way to go? Or, I mean, we haven't yet put a position on it yet, but we're going to examine it really closely, see if it's going to do what needs to be done. What's your thoughts?
From Housing and Homelessness Group, we have been excited about it, but the $10 billion that we're asking for doesn't really seem to be enough for the amount of housing that we need to create. So even though we've kind of weighed in on it, this has been a 2-year kind of passage. I think we may end up supporting it because it's a lot of positive and it's already kind of penciled in for a lot of projects that are in process. But Laurel, what do you think?
Well, I agree. I think, the league should take a careful look at it. And it's going to be very hard to find enough money to really meet the need. But this might be a good place to start. I know Senator Cortese and other legislators have also been looking at creative financing mechanisms to try and break free additional dollars. And really, we need all strategies at this point.
Just a word on how the league comes to a position. So the Housing and Homelessness Group may recommend a support, but it's really up to the board to determine if we support something. So there are a lot of steps still to go on this bond measure.
Sherry Smith posed something. What do you think about? She said, "Can we consider single-family, standalone kind of construction part of affordable housing? Can that be? Is that feasible or?"
I think it really depends on where you are, what's your county, how dense things are already, what kind of construction is being used, because you could use pre-manufactured homes and put those together, or small homes that you can get on Amazon, for instance, and put those in a neighborhood, but it would be different than when you say single family homes and standalones. That's a different kind of visual that I get versus the kind that would probably be the most feasible, as well as environmentally friendly and cost effective. So it's not that it's infeasible, it's just challenging.
And as Laurel says, all of the above.
Yes.
That's all the questions that I see, and I want to thank you very much. You've given us a good pathway, what we have to do and how we have to be on target with it, as well as looking at what we can do with legislation and what we can do with elections. So I will now turn this over back, I think, to Marianne. I think we'll introduce our next speaker. Thank you again for what you've just presented.
Thank you very much. That was a fascinating look at the 3 areas that you all discussed. I'm going to now turn this over to Louise Rothman-Reamer, who will introduce our next speaker, who will talk about Plan Bay Area and the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan, or RSAP. Okay, Louise, you want to take over from here.
Okay, thank you. And as we know, California does have a government that believes in climate change. It also believes in being prepared and has, in fact, enacted legislation that can support forward-thinking and active community participation. So we have to think about how will our airports, our ports, our wetlands, and our communities respond to rising sea levels in the years to come. And I am so pleased that it was 3 women who really were behind the first national regional shoreline and Bay Area plan, and that was Kay Kerr, Sylvia McLaughlin, and Esther Gulick. And they were behind, in the 1950s, the BCDC, which is the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan, or RSAP. We are lucky to have with us Dana Breckwald, who is the Assistant Planning Director for Climate Adaptation, and Sabrina Lopez, who is one of the BCDC Climate Adaptation Planners and is focused on local support for local jurisdictions and their sub-regional shoreline adaptation plans. So I'm just going to turn it over to Dana and Sabrina, and thank you so much for being willing to share with us.
Thank you very much, Louise. As Louise said, my name is Dana Breckwald, Assistant Planning Director for Climate Adaptation at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. I'm here with Sabrina Lopez. We are going to talk to you about BCC's Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan. And I just want to say that we are very honored to be included in your event today. And we're only going to be giving you a brief overview today of how the Bay Area is now required to plan for sea level rise adaptation. But we really hope that this is the start of an ongoing conversation because we want to make sure that you all are empowered to understand how you can play a more active role in sea level rise adaptation around the Bay. So with that, I will turn it over to Sabrina for the presentation.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Sabrina, and I'm a climate adaptation planner at the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, also known as BCDC. We are a state agency in California that permits development along the shoreline and leads regional planning efforts on sea level rise. So for the next few minutes, I'll just give a brief overview of our role in the climate adaptation planning in the Bay and hopefully answer any questions you might have. But before we get started, we want to first just share a little bit more about who we are. I'm Sabrina, like I mentioned, and with me is Dana Breckwald, who currently leads BCDC's Climate Adaptation Planning Unit. We have a team of 4 staff and supervisors that work directly with local jurisdictions supporting their planning processes. And as I mentioned earlier, BCDC is a state agency that manages fill in the Bay, permit development along the shoreline, and leads regional planning efforts on sea level rise. We've been around since 1976, and we're the first coastal zone management agency in the country. We originally started as an agency that was managing a shrinking bay due to fill, but are now managing an expanding bay due to sea level rise. And something to note that is a big component of our work is technical assistance support and making sure that jurisdictions connect and coordinate with a wide range of partners, such as community-based organizations and community groups like you. Also, we have some informational webinars from last year that you can find on YouTube, and we're actively doing our spring webinar series right now where we dive a little deeper into the individual elements that we require in our RSAP guidelines. So if you'd like to join us on our next webinar, which is on March 25th, we'll be covering the vulnerability assessment piece of the guidelines, and you can sign up, or if you want to sign up, you can reach us at these contacts here, or you can scan the QR code that I'll provide on the last slide. But diving into our San Francisco Bay, who here has heard of an estuary? So for those who might not be as familiar, an estuary is a place where fresh water from rivers and streams meet and mixes with salt water from the ocean. Estuaries are some of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. They're even more productive than coral reefs. And our San Francisco Bay is incredibly important as it is of national and international significance, being one of the world's most productive estuaries and an important stop for migratory birds on the Pacific Flyway. It supports a huge metropolitan area across many jurisdictions, which I'm sure you all know, but holding nearly 8 million people. It homes a ton of industry, including 5 ports, with Oakland being the busiest port in all of Northern California. And it's a massive component of the California economy, generating almost $1.2 trillion in output in 2020. Unfortunately, this place is also highly at risk of impact from sea level rise. Though the bay shoreline is only approximately a third of the California coastline, it's expected to experience two-thirds of the state's economic damages from sea level rise. So this like shallow, calm waters that have allowed development to take place right at the edge of the shoreline, along with the history of filling the bay to create new land and wetlands that we now live on top of, have all contributed to this major challenge that we're facing today. The bay is changing, and that will require some serious shoreline adaptation planning to avoid significant impacts to our habitat, infrastructure, and communities along the bay. So before we get into how we should do adaptation planning, it's worth just spending a minute on what could happen if we fail to do this critical work. So BCDC has done the studies, and we know that the impacts would be more widespread than just flooding homes along the shoreline. We expect significant impacts to our habitats, infrastructure, and communities along the shoreline that will be very costly and ripple through our regional economy for decades. So a very conservative estimate based on assessed value of property at risk and the cost of replacing select transportation infrastructure puts the cost of inaction at around $230 billion between now and 2050. So this is why it's so important, and we're doing this work. So a little background on SB 272, but in 2023, state legislation passed into law through Senate Bill 272, giving BCDC responsibility for overseeing shoreline adaptation plans in the Bay Area. The bill requires local governments with BCDC's jurisdictions to develop subregional shoreline adaptation plans by 2034, as well as for BCDC to develop the guidelines that those plans must follow. So, we adopted the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan, more commonly referred to as the RSAP, guidelines in December of 2024. So we're also now responsible for reviewing and approving or denying subregional shoreline adaptation plans based on their consistency with the guidelines. The bill also comes with a carrot because it prioritizes state funding for projects that are in approved plans. So diving a little deeper into the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan, or RSAP itself, we'll just define what it is. It's a plan, a regional plan that guides local governments on how to create local sub-regional plans to achieve coordinated, consistent, and effective sea level rise adaptation that work together over time. In California, land use is locally controlled, so adaptation planning really needs to occur at the local scale. However, sea level rise crosses many jurisdictions and boundaries, so the RSAP is designed to really encourage collaboration and consistency while also supporting local efforts. So it consists of three main parts: a one bay vision, strategic regional priorities, and then the specific guidelines that define how local governments must create a subregional plan. So a one bay vision defines what successful adaptation would look like for the region, and it's organized by 8 topic areas that cover a range of issues, like communities, ecosystem, infrastructure, and more. Strategic regional priorities are the key issues that we've identified that are critical to the region, but require many different individual cities to take action. We've intentionally called them out as key priorities to make sure that they're addressed in adaptation planning. And lastly, the big part of this document are the specific guidelines that define how local governments must create their subregional plans. And a major function that this plays is setting consistency in flood hazards and sea level rise projections, coordination with stakeholders and jurisdictions, equitable engagement, and identifying adaptation strategies and pathways. So, Senate Bill 272 only requires that cities and counties develop these plans, but we know that there are many other key players that should be involved, right? So that's why when creating the RSAP guidelines, BCDC made coordination with various key players a requirement. So stakeholders that are required to be engaged are neighboring jurisdictions, so cities and counties, special districts, including transit, open space, asset owners, operators, managers, major landowners and industries or businesses in the area, tribes, both federally recognized and non-federally recognized, neighborhoods, communities, community groups, and CBOs, and environmental organizations. And as I mentioned before, there are 9 counties in the Bay Area and BCDC's jurisdiction that have to develop regional shoreline adaptation plans. In an effort to ground this in some local details, but without getting into every sub-regional plan, I want to just give a little information about each county and share some of their unique features and or challenges that they might face. So let's start with Marin County, which is over here. I hope you guys can see my cursor. The county has shorelines on both the Pacific Ocean outer coast side as well as in the San Francisco Bay. And this county is effectively served by a single one-way north, one-way south transportation route that's Highway 101, meaning that flooding can really quickly isolate people in these communities. And we're already seeing some sea level rise impacts in this area, such as the Sausalito Park and Ride lot that is frequently half submerged in water today. But the good news is that cities are already working on their subregional plans, and the city of Mill Valley has formally initiated their planning process with us. So you can follow along with me. I'm going to go around the bay like this. And the cities highlighted in green on this map have initiated their subregional plans formally with BCDC. So moving on to Sonoma County. This county has substantial tidal influence from the Petaluma River and low-lying areas along State Route 37. This county has large tracts of fill marshland that is tied to regional transportation, very similar to that of Napa County, which also has historic marshlands that were filled and or levied in over the years. The Napa River is a piece to the hydrodynamics in this area. And I've heard it said, I've heard it described as there's a lot of land in this area that wants to be water again. So moving over to Solano County, this county is special because it sits at the intersection of the bay and the delta containing the Sassoon Marsh. The marsh is one of the most ecologically significant wetlands in the area due to its highly permeable landscape where fresh and saltwater mix, and even has a BCDC protection plan. This county has a lot of duck clubs and is an important stopover habitat along the Pacific Flyway for migratory birds, along with Napa and Sonoma. And what's really exciting is that Solano County is working on and has formally initiated a multi-jurisdictional sub-regional shoreline adaptation plan. So that's really exciting. They're all going in on a plan together. So moving south to Contra Costa County, we can see that this area is also influenced by its connection to the Delta. The county shoreline is lined with extensive rail infrastructure, with more shoreline rail mileage here than anywhere else in the region, acting as a sort of de facto levee system. And the presence of heavy industry, including oil refineries, is also something to note when thinking about sea level rise impacts and how it will look in this area. The city of Richmond has initiated their subregional shoreline adaptation plan as well, as you can see right here on the map. So moving south, we have Alameda County, and they have a particularly urbanized shoreline with transportation infrastructure and salt ponds along the southern portion of the county. Here we have another formally initiated sub-regional plan in the city of Alameda. Santa Clara County homes the largest city in the Bay Area, San Jose, as well as the heart of Silicon Valley. This county also currently has the largest restoration project in the region, the South Bay Salt Ponds Restoration Project, which consists of former industrial salt ponds that are actively being restored to tidal marsh, providing flood protection, habitat, and other benefits. Oh, I'm so sorry. Here we are, San Mateo. So San Mateo County, like Marin, has both Bayside and Outer Coast shorelines. It also hosts San Francisco International Airport, or SFO, which, despite being technically within San Francisco's jurisdiction, is physically connected to several San Mateo communities. This creates shared vulnerabilities and shared responsibilities. Another sub-regional shoreline adaptation plan has initiated in this county as well, in the city of San Mateo. And lastly, we have San Francisco City and County, which has the oldest urbanized shoreline anywhere in the Bay Area and is one of the jurisdictions that has also formally initiated their sub-regional planning process. Much of the city's waterfront is supported by aging seawalls and historic fill, which creates a high stakes need to support this really critical infrastructure. So that's my overview, a little bit for each county. And before wrapping up, we want to just talk about a couple of ways you can get involved in your local planning process. Community and partner engagement is a requirement for every sub-regional plan. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can start by visiting our website and you'll find all the cities and counties that have formally initiated. You can use this QR code here. And every time a jurisdiction formally starts with us, we post their notices, and there you can see all of their city and county contacts. So that's a good way to find more info. And you can sign up for our newsletter and get updates when plans have initiated. If you're interested in viewing our webinars, you can find some from last year on YouTube, or you can join our upcoming one on March 25th. And if you don't see your local city or county on our website, you should also try checking out their website, because a lot of cities and counties and local jurisdictions are working on these processes, but maybe even if they haven't necessarily formally initiated with us yet. And I'm sorry I'm like a minute over, but thank you all for your time. I hope that was helpful. We're available to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you. And let's see if there's some questions.
There's a question from Sean Gilbert, who is curious as to why Antioch and other Delta communities up the San Joaquin River are not included.
I can jump in and answer that. They are not included because they're not in BCDC's jurisdiction. So BCDC's jurisdiction ends part way to the east in Contra Costa County, and then the Delta Stewardship Council has jurisdiction in the area that's more in the Delta. So SB 272 only required cities and counties within BCDC's jurisdiction to do adaptation planning. That said, the Delta Stewardship Council has done their own adaptation plan called Delta Adapts, and they've covered a lot of those jurisdictions in their planning effort.
Okay, thank you. Also, I had a question on, there are some efforts I know in Mountain View and a few other cities in Santa Clara County on building natural dikes that are apparently going to be very helpful with the sea level rise. Are you involved with those?
We are involved in any project that they have that will be included in their shoreline adaptation plan. We also have a permitting side at BCDC, and they're the ones who would issue permits for those sorts of projects. So we have been in conversation with almost every city and county that's required to do a sub-regional plan and are trying to track all the projects that they're doing right now and how they plan on incorporating them into their sub-regional plans. So I'm not sure if I know exactly which projects you're talking about right now, but we are aware of a lot of good sea level rise adaptation that is already underway all over the Bay Area, including in the South Bay.
Are there any other questions on the RSAP planning or any questions from any of our other presenters? Don't all rush forward at once. Thank you so much, Sabrina. And Donna, that was really quite a lot of material to absorb.
Sorry.
but fascinating. Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us, for inviting us. Really appreciate it.
I think being able to share this, the great work that you all of you are doing is really important to us as League, because we have been very much involved in the natural resources protection, as well as the housing and homelessness and the governance areas that we have been talking about today. Are there any other questions from any of the members of our audience for any of our presenters? Don't want to pass anybody by. Okay. Okay, I think we're getting close to the end of our League Day presentations. Now it's your turn, people in the audience. Do you have any suggestions, comments about our League Day presentations? And we are unveiling our new website. Hopefully you have been able to take a look at it. And if you have any comments or suggestions about it, we would be happy to hear those. Because we have all the people here that are working on it. And we also are hoping that those of you who are here and also taking the message to your local leagues about your local representative for League Bay Area. It's important to us that we have your participation in our regional affairs. And we want to include your activities and share your work with all of the region. Because as you can tell from the presentations we've seen, partnering with each other is really critical to accomplish our objectives and our goals. So please designate a representative from your local league to take part in our meetings, as well as our events, and to join our Observer Corps. Madeline, do you have any other comments? Any other comments or suggestions from anyone?
Madeline needs to unmute. That's what it's easier to make a comment. I just want to say how important I think at the end of this event, how we can see how important it is that we work together as a region. And I really want to echo the request that leagues do send members, come check out our monthly meetings. And we would like to set up meetings where we do listen to you and understand how we can better operate as a regional league to serve everybody's needs. And with that, I think we are really at the end of this event. I want to thank everybody who helped work on this. The board did an incredible job. I want to thank especially Kathleen and Teri. Marie Ann is a superstar in this whole operation. Louise, everyone who is here, and some who aren't. This league days have been a part of the league for League Bay Area since the very beginning, and they've all brought lots of information to our league members, and this was no exception. So thank you all, and thank you for joining us, and together we will continue empowering voters and defending democracy. Have a great
Thanks again to our great speakers. I mean, I'm so glad that we got this recorded, because I know I want to watch it again.
Absolutely, me too. All right, and our co-presidents of the California League did an extraordinary job.
Yes,
showing us exactly what the California League is doing. So all the way through, there's a lot to rehear all the way through. So you all will be able to get to do that when you replay it.
And I want to learn more about bling.
Exactly. Exactly. We all need to find a way to incorporate some more bling into our lives.
Right. Okay. Thanks again, everyone. And with that, we will wish you a great weekend, the rest of the day. And again, our sincere thanks for participating. Take care.
Take care.